Today what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit more about my story, and alongside that, fill you in on a little bit of disability history and independent living. And I want you guys to do me a favor, and as I do this, because this is kind of the journey I've followed myself, as you see these images, as you watch these videos, as you hear the stories that I tell about how we've gotten here as people with disabilities in this country, I want you to parallel that with your own stories, of your own individual selves, and of your tribes, and as of Indian people in this country, and see where their parallels exist, where differences exist, and how you can use that in the work that you do. Because one thing I've noticed, as a child of adoption, both my culture as a Native person and my culture as a person with a disability came to me much later in life. It wasn't something I was born into and had my parents teach me from the time I was little. I'm going to get into how I got into finding both those cultures and even knowing they existed. Because as I found out, it was after high school, disability very much is a culture. It has a history, it has a language, it has ceremony, it has tradition. And that's where inspiration comes from as a person with a disability. People use the word empowerment a lot. And I don't necessarily believe that I can empower you or any individual in here can empower anyone else. That's an individual thing. You have to empower yourself. But I can inspire. I can give you the stories and the experience that might inspire you to empower yourself. So, and again, I'm going to put there's a runner mic right here, and anybody has any questions at any moment, shoot them up. If you have a comment, especially how you're feeling, I don't want to get Dr. Phil with everybody, but I will. Let's just talk about it, talk it through. Because I'm not going to have time for question and answer, but I don't like the designated question and answer period, because it means you sit there and you're like, I got a question, it's going to be so good, but I got to wait 20 minutes. I don't want that, because you're going to forget it if you're anything like me. Because I'm ADOS, it's one of my disabilities. It's attention deficit, shiny. Which is actually a diagnosis I heard from one of my high school students who is on the autism spectrum. We were disclosing in class one day, and he said, well, I have Asperger's and I'm also ADOS. And as a person who has heard every acronym in the world, I was like, what the heck is ADOS? And he shared that a little bit with me, so I feel the need to pass that. But to disclose myself, my disability, I talked a little bit about it yesterday, but the official diagnosis is Lateral's Association. And it's an acronym, VATERLS. I'm not sure why it's an association. I don't know if there's dues. Maybe I was supposed to pay, in which case I may not even have it anymore. But every letter stands for a different symptom. But basically what happened is everything on my left side is bigger than everything on my right side. So obviously my hands are different sizes. But even if you look real close, like my ears are different sizes too. Which doesn't pose a problem day to day, unless I'm buying shade. But part of having a disability is having perspective. I think about, what the advantages I was born with, and maybe it could have been worse. Could have been born a girl. And a teacup. Buy 2 bras and sew the cups together. At some point when I got older, women would make fun of me. Those aren't real. You're like, shut up. This one is. Alright, that's what we call in the industry a toe in the water. you laughed at that, I know where I can go next. Hang on, folks. But no, so the history of people with disability in this country, and this may be the first parallel we can draw. We always start out in class by talking about when people started immigrating to this country. And we say, you know, we all know the Statue of Liberty at the bottom. I'm paraphrasing, but it says something like, "Give me your tired, your weak, your huddled masses, yearning to be free." And I think the fine print applies to people with disabilities and Native people. Because the fine print at the bottom says, jokes. Right? Because we don't necessarily know. You know, we say the words, but that's not necessarily what the history shows us. People with disabilities were turned away from this country from the very beginning. They'd show up from boats after spending months traveling from other places in the world, and if you got off that boat and you looked or acted differently, you'd be turned back. Or they had an institution right on Ellis Island that you'd be committed to, and that's where your American story ended. As we expand as a country and go west, as towns begin to develop, every state in our country had something on its books at one point called an ugly law. Now I'm not paraphrasing, it said in the book, it said ugly law. Now an ugly law was to govern us as people with disabilities, and said if you look or act differently, you can only be outside during certain portions of the day, or we're going to throw you in jail. And this was, again, because it made people uncomfortable. If I don't know how to look at you, if I don't know how to talk to you, I'd rather just not see you. And from that, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but from that, we have this history of institutionalization that is in place today. You know, as independent living centers, that's what we fight against, is this idea that people belong in institutions or in nursing homes when there's community options out there. But it was very prevalent for a long time in our country's history. And this first clip I'm going to show you is just an example of what some of those institutions were like. And it is closed caption, and it is audio described. Just to let you know that.